Noa kitaru tatasa ti tata chikstariku, stongo, Jasha Lyons Echohawk, Jaha Jeffidos. Hello everyone, my name is Jasha Lyons Echohawk. I am an enrolled member of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, as well as a descendant of the Pawnee, Omaha, Iowa, and Creek tribes. An intertribal love song, if you will. I introduce myself in both Pawnee and Seminole. My Pawnee name is Ti Tata Chikstariku, which means she who thinks with her heart before she speaks, but I also go by they pronouns as well. I'm a two-spirit birth worker, trained or certified doula, as it's largely known. However, I prefer birth worker, and I'm also a student midwife based here in Indian Territory, also known as Oklahoma. I am a parent of 4 kids. We have a blended family. So it's been a very interesting time to come together in such a way. So our older 2 are very much teenagers, and the younger 2 are what do you call it, like early elementary age. I also organize with the Indigenous Milk Medicine Collective, and part of why I'm here today is to share about our work and Indigenous Milk Medicine Week. I see one of my colleagues, is here, Noah Brittany, and I appreciate, this time and opportunity to share with y'all. I so admire the work of other birth workers, birth keepers, however you are called. As somebody who is trying to bring back that ceremony and medicine in my own community, it's such an honor. And I really look up to, the old OGs, the aunties, all those relatives who definitely precede me, but so inspire and pour into me. So yeah, I can begin with slides that I have. Yeah, so again, this is just my information, initial founder of what is known as Indigenous Milk Medicine Week. It's formerly called Native Breastfeeding Week. And I organize with a group of about 8 folks with this work. This is our newest logo. It's a milk medicine flower. The petals represent milk droplets as well as moon cycles. And just in that, floral theme that so many of our tribal communities have used in telling of our stories. So this is me, me as a nursing parent. I feel like lactation is my superpower, something that I could do when I was able to. Over 7,200 hours of my life had been devoted to breastfeeding, which is about 50 months, which I have made milk, expressed milk, pumped milk, froze milk, warmed milk, leaked milk, sweated milk, swelled with milk, slept in milk, hurt from milk, relief from milk, wore a bra made to contain the milk, wore a bra to support the milk, wore a bra to keep the pads in place that kept my shirt from getting wet with milk, forgot to wear the pads and became soaked with milk, smelled like milk, soured with milk, skin dried with milk, skin cracked with milk, tasted milk, saved milk, donated milk, ran a marathon with milk, was sexually harassed over my milk, went back to school with milk, graduated with milk, went to Standing Rock with milk, prayed with milk, created new life with milk, tandem nursed with milk, saved life with milk, grieved with milk, advocated for milk, advocated with milk, ran for office with milk, locked down with milk, and grew with milk. So to me, it's pretty powerful medicine that we're able to carry, that our bodies are able to create, produce, and something that I have really devoted my life to in terms of making sure that our folks are connected in such a way. It's easier said than done, right? So this is, hopefully you can see this video.
Are you gonna sing? Sing, baby. Are you gonna sing?
Sentira ahí, ¿saben?
Is it Tira Hey?
Na 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 na, tira hey. Na 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 tira he ya na ne yo ya na he ne.
Mm.
Te na 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 tura he. Na 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 tura he.
So that is a capture of my one of my children that I was able to nurse. They are about 18 months, and the banging on the couch is the drumming that my child had picked up from watching their other parent, who's a singer in our community. And the hand waving, the other hand waving for us as Pawnee people means usually we do it and we'll say "durahe," which is like all good. But when we don't even have to use words to communicate to whoever we're encountering as a salutation, as a greeting, that like, hey, I see you, we're on the level. And so it was just, you know, to me, like that moment, this baby is being connected in so many you know, so many layers to who they are as an Indigenous person. Just, you know, in the act of picking up my kid, this toddler who wanted to nurse, and having a moment not just with myself and this baby, but with, you know, their other parent, the other, you know, family members that were in the room. And we were just, you know, just I think in passing, just I think coming, just having a conversation, and then they walked up and wanted to nurse. And so with that is part of the inspiration behind this work of Indigenous milk medicine. Of course, this is nothing new, right? Like just because we've coined it as it is right now, it's always been in existence. It initially started as Native Breastfeeding Week, which is a very gendered term. However, most of the community knows, you know, what we're talking about when we say breastfeeding. And at the time, for myself, I was just talking about natives, as I call our people, intertribal people. And usually that kind of just dictates to a certain area known as, you know, the what is now called the United States. It was mostly a social media advocacy campaign that I called into existence for our people here in what is known as Oklahoma. Being that we're a state that has a lot of Native people in one place, 39 tribal jurisdictions, but even more Native people than that. I, as somebody who was a nursing parent and who was going through significant issues or significant barriers in my community, even though I did have a lot of access and privilege to be able to nurse my babies, it still, there was a disconnect within my community. I worked for a tribal nation and was not supported in the ways that I could have been to be able to foster and continue that relationship with my babies. I was sexually harassed, and that was kind of a final straw for me with that place of employment. At the time, I had to work, you know, in an office 8 to 5 pre-pandemic, and that's the kind of job that I could get. I know not a lot of our people are able to. Just in general, a lot of people don't have that opportunity to get like you know, a job that's not service related, right? Because there's all kinds of barriers that are in front of us unfairly in order to, well, not to understand this, you know, incredible need that us as lactating folks, as Indigenous parents, as mothers, you know, Native people, that we don't get the respect. And so in my advocacy for myself with what was happening in my workplace, I started looking into information and research related to what are other tribal nations doing for their people who are lactating or postpartum, you know, families, parents in general. Like, what does paid leave look like? Policies that or resolutions that could be implemented in my community. And in doing that, I connected with my state's, as it's called, breastfeeding coalition, and realized that there was none for our intertribal folks here, and wanted, you know, to know what they were doing for Native people, if they had connected to tribal nations, or, you know, what kind of resources are out there. At the same time, there wasn't just a few years ago, there wasn't as much visibility on what a lactating Native person looked like. And in some ways it was very romanticized. There's tons of beautiful pictures. I presented some beautiful pictures, but even the dialogue of frustrations and just the realness of what we're going through was not there. Even the deeper context of why our communities do not have as many folks that are either able to provide milk for their babies or are willing to provide milk for their babies. And thus, I was like, well, let's call out a week to, raise awareness and recognition in my state. Didn't get far with that coalition. So I reached out to some folks I knew at a national level, a national org, a Native nonprofit based in, I think, the Great Lakes area, or maybe just west of that. I can't even think of the state right now, but they're a national nonprofit that does work in health, and had what they call at the time, I think they still call it like a breastfeeding advocacy campaign for Native people, and briefly tried to get it off the ground at a national level, especially after researching that there was nothing like this nationally. And I say because of my thinking at the time was just within what is called the United States. And they kind of just ghosted me in further conversations. And so I carried on with just going through with this week. This is back in 2019 when our first week was implemented. Reached out to some folks that I knew, just thinking, well, let's just see what happens. I know people that could probably post or talk about their story, and let's go from there. And maybe in the another time we can figure out what it looks like. And the community grew in a way that I could not have imagined. And so this is kind of a little bit about the week itself. We believe Native breastfeeding and chest feeding, or just Indigenous milk medicine, and the collective itself is reclaiming our place as healers through milk medicine for our Indigi babes. With the week, we are promoting culture and body sovereignty. We're promoting first food sovereignty. We're promoting traditional Indigenous kinships or relationships, parenthood. We are promoting healing and community health, public health. We did initially, like I said, start as a social media campaign where we were increasing visibility of what we look like, of what Indigenous parents or lactating people look like. And at that point, as it grew, realized the community had a bigger call to us for seeking out resources and support. And also just recognizing the data that's out there is very, very scarce, and it's very gendered. And even the way that they research what Native lactation experiences look like is very, how to say it, it's limited in perspective, in that it only identifies American Indian and Native Alaskan folks that identify as breastfeeding mothers, and not everybody does. So our week does occur within what is known as National Breastfeeding or Lactation Month in the United States. That happens in August, and we are the second Sunday. The start of this our week begins on a Sunday, and that would be the second Sunday, basically following World Breastfeeding Week, as it's called. This is just a part of it too, is that we are try to continually heal from the colonized perspectives, the systems that are imposed on us. This thing that they call extended breast or chest feeding basically means people who breast or chest feed their children past the age of 1. And for many of us, that's not a thing. We just nurse until our child is no longer wanting to nurse. So anytime, anywhere, on demand until we're done. But again, that's easier said than done, because we know there's a lot of folks that have such a disruption that they have never seen it in real life, or they haven't, or they don't have the capacity to, and that's understood as well. Who is Indigenous Milk Medicine Week? Basically, our Indigenous Milk Medicine Collective, that's a typo. We're a grassroots collective of Native women, Two-Spirit, and femme lactation providers and supporters. We've got 2 of the let's see, I think they said there's now almost 20 IBCLCs, which is internationally board certified lactation consultants. There are about 18,000 internationally board certified lactation consultants, and only maybe 20 of those are Indigenous. It's an astronomical, like that's not even a percent. And we have 2 that work with us through the collective. Outside of that, where we've been, providers ourselves of milk medicine. We are rooted in our communities and our different tribal communities. Some of us are Indigenous breastfeeding counselors. Some of you might know Cami Goldhammer and Kim Morsalis, who are the IBCLCs. And this right here, this is some information. This wasn't necessarily a presentation for y'all specifically, but this is how they kind of look at us in terms of data. Right now, again, that this data is only, it basically provides this like deficit idea of what Native lactation experiences look like. And from our work in community, not just the collective, but just the voices that have been sharing, we're not deficit communities, right? We're totally full of strength and power and beauty in our resilience. Although it's unfair resilience, nobody should have to go through what we have gone through, and yet many communities have. So when we do, there are significant disruptions. So however, the data right here talks about initiation of lactation from child to lactating parent or lactating person, because sometimes it might not be the parent, but I guess here, this is what they're talking about is just mothers and breastfeeding. So do we initiate breastfeeding? Duration is how long do we breastfeed, and exclusivity is how the ability to only provide breast or chest milk. And the positive thing about what happens in our communities as Indigenous people, if we are able to be supported for the first 6 months of being able to breast or chest feed, we are more likely to go for a year or longer. And I've seen it anecdotally, or actually not even that's a case study. I'll just say case studies, because it speaks more to the validity of what we are doing as Native people, to the validity of our medicine work. I've seen so many Indigenous parents, mostly those that identify as mothers and breastfeeders, that just achieve 6 months, and then they go to 9 months, and then they go to a year, and then they just keep going. And by world recommendations, it's about 2 years to really give the nutrients as it's measured for all children, a good healthy start to life. But we know it's deeper than that for us. We know it's more complex than just nutrition, right? Than just like the nuts and bolts of milk to baby. So part of this, is just recognizing like that public health begins with our connection to the land. And I'm sure many of you know, everywhere we are, we're on Indigenous land. And that is something, that has been so, that was part of the reasons why we have these disruptions, have these disconnections. I don't think I need to go through all of this with y'all. I'm pretty sure some of y'all, if you're here, you are very aware of, and I maybe should say trigger warning, these are very hard topics to cover. And yet through this work, that's what we're dealing with, right? We have such quote unquote low rates of being able to provide milk medicine to our babies, because there were people who actively created policies against our people to disrupt our birth keeping, to disrupt our traditional kinship ways, to put us in binary or dichotomous family living situations, right? You're a man, you're a woman, this is what man does, this is what woman does, and let's get rid of your medicine people, and let's get rid of your religion, let's make you like us. And it never worked, right? It doesn't even work for the people who created those systems. Something that was shared with me in a presentation I saw some years ago is former United States Secretary of State Henry Kissinger said, who controls the food controls the people. And so, some of us may be aware that our physical crops, right, were burned down. Our bison, for those of us that were plains folks, were, you know, systematically wiped out to starve us. And with that, you know, disrupting the traditional kinship means you're disrupting first food sovereignty as well, you know, disrupting that relationship that happens between baby and parent. And for that matter, baby and relative, because we also, you know, practice milk sharing, not in as abundance as it was before, but we had, you know, people that are in our families that would do that for us. And so Indigenous milk is a practice of consent, of body sovereignty, of practicing that traditional kinship, following the needs of our children. And it's not, you know, and it's to help heal this trauma here, though. So this is, you know, part of it. This is pictures of kids who were taken to what they called boarding schools or residential schools, these institutions. Colonial acts like this displaced families and built shame into our communities, interrupting intergenerational teachings such as Indigenous milk medicine. You know, just to name the kind of colonization, it's settler colonialism, which is really about where we are is who we are. So when you remove us from our land, you remove us from our ceremonies, you remove us from our ability to practice our rituals, just our ways in general. I'm, like I mentioned before, I'm Pawnee, and we come from the stars, and we were located in what is known as Nebraska, parts of Kansas and parts of Colorado. And we aligned our ways to, like, our agriculture to the stars, our seasons, right? We're with the stars, with that weather pattern, totally different climate than where we are now in Oklahoma. And even just other practices were tied to that calendar, right? And when we were so removed, you know, then we have to rely on rations that we know now is like a form of biological imperialism, or, you know, they give us, they were not nutrition, not the nutrition that we need, and if you could call it nutrition. You know, we did what we had to do in order to survive, and now we have communities that suffer, you know, large rates of or disproportionate rates of obesity, of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, stuff that gives you cancer. Here, this is part of the story as well. I don't know if you saw the data point earlier, but formula supplementation for American Indian and Alaska Native mothers who breastfeed, based on that data, is 97%. So if you don't give us a chance, or if you don't support us, we're more likely to supplement with formula. A lot of that has to do with the barriers or access to milk donors, or to donor milk. Also to the lack of practice of milk sharing, which is somebody that, you know, is within your community, and maybe they're within your family who makes milk, who could, you know, provide that to the babies. That's something probably now that's really difficult to do in this time of this pandemic. This particular book talks about a Black and Cherokee woman who had these quadruplets, and it's a really hard story if, you know, anybody's interested. Just trigger warning, you know, it's exploitation of our people, and they really use them as a way to commodify or to promote formula. You know, this part of it here is again, patriarchy, misogyny, and bigotry, which is basically just the ways that, like, even policy was implemented through what do they call it, the courts of Indian offenses, which was established in, like, the time that they were really removing a lot of us from the land in, like, the late 1870s to, like, early 1900s. And then I think the Court of Indian Offenses went on to, like, the 1940s, maybe, in the United States, as it's called. But yeah, just putting Christianity on us, or restricting our cultural identity, our ability to practice politically, culturally, spiritually. You know, we were imprisoned. That's where some of our ceremonies went underground, and we had to practice, you know, undercover, if you will. This artwork, though, is, you know, this new life that we're wanting to bring, or maybe not new life, but this it's just the support of what it takes when you have community come together though and bring forward these medicine ways that we know that are so, you know, innate to us, even if we've never practiced it ourselves. It's like sitting there waiting for us to call into it, to call upon it. And it's entirely possible. What we've done with Indigenous Milk Medicine Collective and Indigenous Milk Medicine Week. This was just an opportunity, you know, to advocate to other folks about what we can do to you know, continue the call to action for investing in our communities, right? We have to acknowledge the source of Native health disparities, if you will, and support the healing and cultural initiatives of Native communities, such as Indigenous Milk Medicine Collective. You know, we can reintroduce local and traditional foods, you know, whether that is the food that we all are eating now or the food that our babies, you know, need to eat from the beginning. Yeah, and then again, just this promotes nation building, right? Like it promotes so much healing, like many times over. And in fact, there's, I don't know if you all are aware, but epigenetics is like the is part of what happens when we're able to reconnect how to say it, like when we're able to nurse our babies and practice that relationship, that impacts generations forward, as well as healing, you know, ourselves and those ancestors before that precede us. This was one of my children. This is how we grow our corn in Pawnee way. We make mounds, and my baby thought they looked like nurses, as he called them, nipples. But just, you know, this is the practice of land back, right? It's rematriation, it's reclamation of our sovereignty, of language, of ceremony, of these medicines, right? You know, if you bring something back into your community, this one act, it can ripple out into other areas where you might start finding the language for what we call, you know, breast or chest feeding, for even what the milk is called, or even how the milk is blessed. This is what we did in 2020 to celebrate the week. Some of those titles on there were like, how to say it, like a live Facebook or a webinar, if you will. And then this year, we really honored what community had requested and had the need to just understand why we went from Native Breastfeeding Week to Indigenous Milk Medicine Week. So the use of inclusive language, we had an opportunity to ask an IBCOC where some the viewers could come on and talk to Cami and Kim. We had workplace advocacy because we have so many Native, amazing Native people. Most of these people identify as women in the workplace who have created safe workplace conditions for their community, whether that be at the casino or other jobs within the tribe. A lot of them had come from all over. We had an opportunity to visit with other Indigenous folks to talk about culturally relevant preparation, prenatal, what you could do before your milk comes in, and then postpartum, what we do to support the milk once, you know, baby is here. And we had also had conversations, support groups for folks who are parenting, again, in this time of pandemic, folks who breast or chest feed older kids, like toddlers, preschoolers, and beyond, just to hold space, because you don't see a lot of that, you know, outside of our, well, just anywhere, like whether you're Native or not. And this kind of ends the slideshow itself, but I just want to say, like, we are through our work, we're trying to shift the conversation, you know, this and take back the narrative of what it means to breast and chest feed your child. It's not just, you know, we're a bunch of breast and chest feeding folks who just, you know, want to go lock down in a you know, in a store that shun somebody for breast or chest feeding. It's more than that. We know it's deeper, and we want to really address the context of injustice that has happened to our people, that has disrupted our family or kinship ways, as well as continuing to call for more research, more data into what happens when you can implement, or call back. Oh, those are old handles, by the way. I just realized I didn't even update that. Our IG is Indigenous Milk Medicine Week, and our Facebook is an Indigenous Milk Medicine Collective. But I'll just exit the screen here, and we can, let's see, it might be easier to look at the Instagram, but this is our work right here. We, again, we're grassroots, so a lot of our work is on us. We have formally come together where we've got, our official logo, with the milk moon petal flower, milk medicine flower, I should say, and are looking to start taking on more opportunities to really advance this work on behalf of community. We do put out, and reshare different things that are happening across Indian country, if you will. We have been able to have conversations with folks across these colonial borders, and that is something that we're also trying to figure out how to appropriately expand, if that's something we can do. What does that look like? We are very adamant about supporting other community members, especially because, like, for example, Black Breastfeeding Week was the last week of August, and that's what they call it, Black Breastfeeding Week. They, in some ways, are part of this fellowship that we have with other folks who have been historically traumatized and are working to reclaim some of their own practices within their own communities, and and have been supportive or followed some of their lead, if you will. We, for the first time, they had Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Breastfeeding Week, as they call it. And we had some of our Native Hawaiian relatives on our programming for this year's Indigenous Milk Medicine Week. We still continue to share stories, but we're rethinking how we want to honor those folks who are sharing these stories, because they are medicine, and we want to recognize that is really, it's more complex than just like asking folks for photos now, especially now that they're so abundant. We want to be mindful of their of the medicine that they're providing to community. Some of our week we were able to provide what do they call sunrise ceremonies, which I know not all tribes recognize sunrise. It was just an opportunity for us to kind of give honor to those folks that came before, and to just take appreciation of the day. This one is one of my faves here, but this is Elder Mary Crow.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Mary Crow.
So she was able to provide milk to her child, she said, who was born premature, and I think she said he was like 4 pounds, like a really tiny baby, but she was able to establish that relationship with her child, and now she said he's like 6'4", like a giant guy. And yeah, she was able to bless us with song during the week.
Send up prayers this morning in honor.
But I don't want to take too much time. We can, if you want, you can, go to the page. It's also on our Facebook. There she is right there with her baby, and we appreciate this, Elder, for sure. Like, I just love Mary. A lot of this work initially just started off with these stories, and has certainly transformed in a way where we're able to, again, have a platform to help uplift other organizations or other folks, other Native folks doing amazing things to call back ways, or to reclaim space, or need resources to be able to do that. We've had some proclamations here. This is kind of a lot to look at, but some of the folks in various places that, in these states, as they're called, have been able to get recognition for their weeks. This one is Native Breastfeeding Week, as is recognized in the state of Wisconsin, and I think they did it in Minnesota. And I feel like there was one other state. I know cities have had proclamations as well. That was just advertising our shirt. And yeah, again, we honestly want to get more into our own infographics with our own information, not meaning our own just as Indigenous Milk Medicine Collective, but I mean that is specific, that would be more culturally relevant to our Native people. That's something still that we lack in the social, in the internet, I guess, if you will, just not just on social media, but just even sometimes when you're researching for culturally relevant information or culturally appropriate information regarding lactation, or even, some of this birthwork space, it's still limited in what makes sense to you as a Native person or an Indigenous person. This is a image of milk by one of our folks with the collective. They had she had a preemie. I can't remember how early her baby was, but was in NICU for a while, and she nursed her baby by pumping, and pumped so much milk that she had to get a freezer, which, she's shared as much about how hard that was, and so many times she wanted to give up, but we continue to support her and love on her, because it's a lot of work. She does have the capacity to do that though, right? Like, she's in a position where she can be in a place to pump around the clock and provide that milk for baby. And we know not a lot of our people have that chance. And so we are still trying to, find ways to work within our tribal communities and beyond to help, again, raise up the issues of inequity and what happens, what can happen when you are able to support our, our health and cultural practices. Oh, I didn't even go to our Facebook page. This is where you can find our, like, if you go to videos, you can see where some of our sessions took place, because that's where they took place live, in case you missed any. And you'll see the rest of our, what do you call them? Sunrise ceremonies and just other things we've shared. Even last year's events are still on there. We've not taken them down.
Thank you so much. Do you feel like you could expand, just before we open up to the whole group, just in particular about gender inclusive language, for if that is new to people, and just expand a bit on that?
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, I can. So I really liked our, so last year we had a two-spirit chest feeding and non-binary nursing event that was well attended. That's available on our Facebook. And then this year's event was inclusive language in the lactation space, to kind of expand on just to advocate the call for those of us who don't identify as breastfeeders, who don't identify as mothers, in many of our tribal communities, we have honored gender diversity. We've honored those folks who, as we largely know them as two-spirit, who might carry, just this masculine, feminine essence, if you will. It's so hard to really explain that in English words, right? And yet I know I don't have enough of my language to really also name it specifically. But I'm still trying to work on that. And just like with our work, we are doing the same thing. We are trying to honor and make sure that an inclusive space does provide, more room, more hope for our communities, right? Like, it's not to say that nobody can call it breastfeeding ever again. If you are a breastfeeder, you are a breastfeeder, just the same as there are people who identify as chest feeders. And that's why we went with Indigenous milk medicine, because ultimately we just want Indigenous milk medicine for our babies. We don't, however they get it, in our first recognition of the week, we had someone who identifies as two-spirit and also did not provide, did not body feed their baby themselves. They actually adopted a baby that was they fostered for a bit and then ended up adopting this child. While they were doing that though, they knew they wanted to provide milk to this baby. So they were in a position to be able to get donor milk for this baby. And I thought that was just awesome. And I wanted that story, you know, shared, and we did. This person is still like a relative of mine, but not, who wasn't able to continue with the work as they had shared. But it was just, again, to speak to the Indigenous lactation experience, which is not always, you know, people physically providing milk to their own baby. It's also people who are finding ways to provide Indigenous milk to Indigenous babies. And that is like really the importance there. And it's important to recognize how people want to be honored, right? You know, it goes along with like pronouns. Mine are she, they, and you know, most people do honor all of that for me. And we just want to make sure, you know, everyone feels seen, feels affirmed. I mean, it's hard enough to be Native or Indigenous in the world, right? Knowing, you know, what's happened to us and carrying that with us sometimes, and trying to work through it. And so yeah, this space is for everyone that's being able to provide that Indigenous milk medicine to these little humans that we know, that we want to see be fully realized, you know, and their truest or honest potential. And so yeah, so we made it, and it really was a no-brainer for us as a collective to call it what it is. Honestly, again, like that's not even like, we just kind of put it into the social media interwebs, if you will. But we know that our people have been calling this, you know, medicine for like forever. And some of us may not have known that. Like, I shouldn't talk with so much privilege. I just mean, once we're in this work, once we're in this this field, if you will, you know, we recognize that's been calling us for some time. And again, you know, hopefully people are able to learn in their own Indigenous tongues, you know, what it is they specifically called it. But again, it's to honor this, you know, this medicine to our babies for our futures. So I hope that was, yeah, I hope that explains a little bit of the need. I don't know, I guess because I'm just so used to it, I don't really know how not to like why wouldn't you use their pronouns, or why wouldn't, you know, strive for inclusive language? But I understand that has been for some folks, it has been controversial at times, and we've gotten some comments here and there on our social media pages, mostly on Facebook, for people who I guess feel like they're being invisibilized or erased, and that's certainly not what we are intending to do. Again, there's room for however you want to identify, you know, with the act itself, breast or chest feeding, but ultimately we're trying to get at the root of why there was even the disruption in the first place.
Can I expand a little bit? I've spent a lot of time just, you know, thinking about this, and also I think that it's the gender inclusive language is obviously essential, and just acceptance and normalizing all of the ways that we walk in this world and our paths is essential. But I want to just say that as I see it as so much more, this shift from calling it and recognizing that this is Indigenous medicine is what has resonated so much for me personally. And, you know, I usually don't share a lot of my personal stories on this because I want other people to ask questions. But for today, I just want to say that with my story, I mean, my daughter's an adult. I just had my first grandchild. And when I was giving birth, I had a massive postpartum hemorrhage, and was one of those rare people who, you know, had a damaged pituitary gland and literally, for truth, could not make milk. And and it was one of those situations where I had a mother who understood that there was so much more to nurturing and that bond and that connection. And I just started with, all of the gadgets and devices and donated milk, all of these mothers and friends who gifted me their beautiful milk. And I just kept nursing with a supplemental nursing system. And at about 4 months, I was done. It was hard. I had to give up, for my own mental health. I had to stop the rhythm of the pumping and the syringe feeding and the supplemental nursing system and all of that just agonizing rhythm. And I made the decision to throw away all of the tubing and all of the things and pull out a bottle for the very first time at 4 months. And then I fed her that milk, sometimes formula, because there wasn't as much access, with as much love, with all of my Indigenous motherhood that I could. And she drank it down and wanted to nurse. And so I did. And I continued to nurse for 5 years without a drop of milk. But it was, my Indigenous parenthood. It was absolutely medicine to be offering that in whatever way. And now it brings tears to my eyes. And my daughter's actually on the call, but she's flowing with milk. And she told me, because she's donating milk to others, even though her baby is only 6 weeks old, and she's donating milk and was just saying, well, people gifted me that. People fed me, they helped feed me, and that she wants to do the same. So what I wanted to expand with that, the reason I went through that story is because I feel like there's also so much where I've worked with families and, in my decades of birth work, where they feel as if they can't fully nurse, or that they have to go back to work and pumping is not working, with their life, or, they're struggling with dynamics with parents and other caregivers, or, maybe they don't have custody for their child right now. Maybe they never will again. All of these different struggles that we all face, and that especially Indigenous people face. And this idea that there has to be, perfection and smoothness and privilege and all of these aspects in order for it to be the medicine and the gift that it is. And so what I am loving and appreciating so much about this shift and about this campaign is that, whatever you are, whatever your family, whatever your situation, whatever, how much is milk that flows from your body, and how much is gifted by others, and in what, if it's fed in a bottle or fed from your body or fed from whatever you call your body, that it is all about us, stepping in to nurture our next generations, and that we're having just space and love for just bringing in as much of that just pure love and goodness in whatever way it's flowing. And so I just wanted to share that as I've listened to your presentation, and as I have been just thinking about these terms and following your Instagram, that those are things that just have kept coming up, is that there really is space for all of these ways and all of the situations that we have, and that act, that demand, that expression is going to mean that more people, do offer their bodies and do exclusively breastfeed and do, have multiple partners, nurse the babies, or, all of those different, that act of just saying, we can do this and we should do this, is going to help the milk flow in whatever way. So I just wanted to share that, and just say that I appreciate everything you're doing. What I would like to do now is I'm going to open up so that anyone who would like to ask a question or share, if you could raise your hand, that does make it a little bit easier. And I don't know why you keep being muted. Oops. So I will fix that again. But if we can have some space for just raising your hand, and then if you just want to call on the names, if you see them, And then when you, and then we can just have space for questions or stories, or whatever clarifications anyone would like to, that would be great. So you are now able to unmute yourself. Everyone on this call is, and so if you could just call on the people as they raise their hands, and also feel free to write anything in the chat box if you like.
No, yeah, and thank you, Rhonda, for sharing your story. Like, I teared up as well. And that is, like, the hope, right? The goal is just reestablishing these connections that are ancestral and so needed. And thank you for your medicine. Like, I see Brittany's hand up.
Hey, it's not me that has the question. It's gonna actually be my friend right here. Oh, sorry.
Hello. Hey, my name's Kixala. So grateful for all the work that has gone in to make this happen, and so grateful for all the knowledge that you've shared. Thank you so much. And all the babies that have been fed so that we can be fed by this knowledge together. I'm wondering, with your collective work and doing work across so many people's territories and holding so many people's knowledge and stories, how do you make space in between, whether it is like a pan-Indigenous like approach or the gathering of everything that you have and everything that you know, and then grounding that in like the people's knowledge where we are, where we might come and show up as guests? How do you kind of hold that space in between? If you have any tips for us who are doing this work. Thank you so much.
No, it's nice to meet you. Yeah, thank you for the question. And that is a large question, right? Like, I'm thankful that I have a community that I work with, right? Like, we're this collective here that, and our work is rapidly growing. Like, again, to restate, this only began in 2018 in terms of the larger advocacy. I mean, my work precedes that, but just organizing it and putting it out there. And from 2019 and beyond, it just continues to grow in such a way that it's all this community that continues to reach out and honestly feed us. They pour into us of what they want, what they need, what they are wanting, like what kind of space they want held for them. That's the best, like, I guess, way to answer it for me is just, we are accountable to a community, and the community continues to grow. So as it grows, we just continue to try to respond as as appropriately. Again, we are still looking at how we interact with those folks that across these colonial borders, because there is such a big need from that community up there. I don't know what research looks like right up there. I'm not sure their exact numbers. I know it resonates, especially because we did decide to use the term Indigenous versus Native or Native American. Honestly, that didn't really speak to the power of the work. And so I think the best way to answer that is because it's not just me. I work with many other folks, and even within that, like, we also answer to many other folks. So it's almost just this larger community that continues to share with us the kind of space they want held. And so as far as we know, we're putting it together the best way we can, and if it lands, it lands. If it doesn't, they'll let us know. They always do. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I just want to say, thank you, Mado, Iriwaiturahe, for having me today. Like you said before, it's an honor to be part of this space and to be invited to the Zoomcast. I hope I represented our collective as best as I could. And yeah, you can follow our work at Indigenous Milk Medicine Week on Instagram. And then our Facebook page is called Indigenous Milk Medicine Collective. We will be putting out a survey for our how our week went. We use that for feedback and to see what other I guess programs, you know, we could put out or offerings we could make, given our connection to some of those resources. And I don't remember if I did have my email on the slide, but I can put it in the chat if y'all have like separate, if separate requests or whatever. But yeah, feel free to hit me up. I try to be as accessible as I can. And just thank you for this space, Mano.